This is the second video for Module 1 on Business Communication Management and Success. And in this video, I just want to review PAIBOC and then talk about one of the other key concepts from the module, which is comparing the context or situation of school writing versus workplace or business writing. And that's related to analyzing the context or situation of business writing versus school writing, which many students are more familiar with. And so again, PAIBOC, as is covered extensively in Module 1 on pages 12 and 13, which we reviewed on the first day of class, stands for purpose, audience, information, benefits, objections, and context. Okay? And so that last video ended with this image here, which gives you a visual representation of the relationships between all of this. Of course, in business writing, as is true in much writing, but business writing in particular is really focused on the purpose and information. And so I often think of this as the kind of get her done principle. Business communication always has an organizational purpose or is trying to solve an organizational problem or meet an organizational communication need. And so the job is the primary purpose and what information is necessary to accomplish that task and get her done. But getting that purpose met and that goal achieved, of course, as we just talked about, is really dependent upon the relationships between the audience and the writer and understanding how to motivate the audience by providing them with benefits and overcoming any potential objections that they might raise. And so the way that business writing then structures itself is really around these key notions of purpose and, of course, audience. Okay, and so in terms of business writing purposes, our book breaks that down. These will always, in a general way, come back to one of these three, or a combination of two of these three purposes. You're either writing in business to inform, so provide some kind of information, to make a request or persuade someone to take an action. And then often as part of each of these, you're writing to build goodwill and continue to maintain those relationships or establish those relationships that we talked about between the audience and the writer, as well as the audience and the organization. Okay. The book also gives you a list of questions which are found on page 10 related to this notion of purpose as well as audience. You want to think about the overall situation and whether or not you need to send a message and how. We talked in the video about email, how requests that ask someone to change their lifestyle, their culture, their values, those kind of big requests, maybe changing jobs, moving to a new site location, transferring laterally in the organization to another city, being fired. Those are the kinds of communication situations where your medium or channel is probably not email. It's probably not even maybe a letter or a memo. The best way, the most human way that really takes into account the audience's psychological needs, right, is probably a phone call or a personal visit in those kinds of big request situations. On the other hand, you might have a decision to make whether or not you want to make a phone call to your boss about something, or whether or not, as we discussed in the earlier part of this video, you need a kind of written record of the requests. Often I'll send requests that are about, say like payroll and things like that by email, so that there's some kind of written record that I made the request on when. So that if there's ever a question about whether or not I held up my end of the bargain, there's documentation for that. On the other hand, if it's just a quick, I need a confirmation, maybe a text message is appropriate in your organization's culture. So you want to think about, you know, what's the channel? Should you send a message? How should you send it in order to solve that organizational or communication need, purpose, and meet the psychological needs of your audience so that in the end you get her done, right? Okay. In terms of then this, going back to the other big part of that, purpose, audience, and then the situation or context that this message is occurring in, we want to think about how the business or work context is different than the academic or school context. Most of us have written for school. If you're in school, you're used to writing essays. You're used to writing for a particular audience, and business writing changes some of that. So as our textbook talks about, the purpose of school writing is actually most frequently to just show you have learned. And so you're frequently just writing for demonstration, not actually to inform the reader, okay? However, as we've just spoken about, in the business or workplace situation, your purpose is actually to get her done. You're trying to accomplish some kind of organizational need. You're trying to get the job completed. And so the purpose actually is much more critical and is the primary. It's audience focused rather than writer focused. Okay, so again, that's really a different approach or end goal for the writing. So we'll put that here. This is more writer focused, trying to demonstrate that you've learned to your teacher. And in the business world, we're looking at writing that is more audience focused, because we need that audience to act in order to get the job accomplished. Okay. In terms of that, the textbook also talks about the differences in your audience. So who's the primary audience for your school writing? Well, clearly it's going to be your teacher and peers. Okay. And one of the things that's interesting about this audience is that your teacher is paid to read your writing. So everything that you write is going to get read, regardless of how well it's the document design, you know, whether or not it's clear in its explanations. But the difference in the work world is that people are busy. Time is money, and people are they're at work, they get distracted, they have multiple requests they have to attend to. So readers won't read if they can't follow it or understand it. You'll lose your writer or your readers immediately, and they won't actually read the message. If they don't understand why it applies to them, it won't happen. So you have more resistant readers. You have to actually grab their attention through things like subject lines in emails, stating your purpose immediately in documents. That should always be at the top. So we'll talk about that under organization. But your reader's a very different audience. They're not going to read something if it isn't clear to them. Related to that clarity is the fact that in school, you're writing to an audience who already knows the information, right? You're writing to your teacher or to your peers who have read the same textbook. They're familiar with what you are presenting. And so what that means is that if it's unclear, they can fill in the blanks. However, in a business writing situation, that is not going to be true at all. You are going to be writing to people for whom the information is new. And so if it's unclear, they have no way to know what's missing or what they need to know. If it isn't in there, it didn't happen. And so they're not going to fill in the blanks for you unless you specifically explain. Okay. In terms of organization, as I mentioned, if we're all familiar with kind of essay format where you begin with a thesis and you have this structure of paragraphs. Some people have learned the 5-paragraph essay, so you have 3 main points, and then you repeat in conclusion, right? That's kind of our standard organization, and you can rely on that in order to have your readers know where they are in the document. In business writing, your purpose is first. You want to make sure it's upfront and clear. Again, going back to these distracted readers, these busy readers, if they don't know why they're reading the document, they will not continue. You also want to aid your readers by grouping information by topic and using headings in order to help readers to skim. You're trying to do that. You're trying to help readers skim and scan your document. Whereas in an essay, you can expect that the reader is probably going to just rely on the paragraphs to find their points. So they're reading all the way through. They may know that you're going to have 3 paragraphs, and so they'll just look for the points to be in the paragraphs, whereas readers of business documents aren't going to read from beginning to end, so they need those headings in order to really be sure of where the information is located. In terms of style, we know that academic writing tends to be formal. It uses longer sentences and more complex sentence structure. And that is seen as a bonus, right? You want to sound smart. And so you might use specialized terms in order to, present yourself as a professional in that situation. There's this little Calvin and Hobbes comic strip at the bottom that kind of demonstrates that here. So Calvin's writing a paper and he says, "I used to hate writing assignments, but now I enjoy them. I realized that the purpose of writing is to inflate weak ideas, obscure poor reasoning, and inhibit clarity. With a little practice, writing can be intimidating, an impenetrable fog. Want to see my book report?" And so then Hobbes reads the title, and it's "The Dynamics of Interbeing and Monological Imperatives in Dick and Jane, a Study in Psychic Transrelational Gender Modes." And Calvin says, "Academia, here I come." So we all get that joke because we know that that's the style of academic essay writing. But in business communication, that's not going to fly. As we just talked about, people are busy, they need to have clarity, they need to have it clearly organized so they can scan or skim. And in terms of style, you're looking for clear, direct, short, and precise information. And you may have to, it depends on your audience. You want to assess your audience's knowledge and decide at whether or not you need to define key terms. So if you are writing to other mechanics, you can use the specialized vocabulary that you would use that they'll understand. But if you have to explain something to, say, the accountant or someone who works in the office, you may have to actually define key terms that they wouldn't be familiar with. And so you're not trying to sound smart at the expense of your reader. You're trying to be clear, direct, precise, and give the reader the information they need. So again, going back up to your audience, it's not writer focused. In business writing, we're looking at audience focus. How can we help the audience to act so that we get the job done? And then again, related to organization in terms of design, essays typically follow a pretty standard paragraph format. They may have a title, but then It's just a string of paragraphs. For the most part. In business writing, though, we're going to help readers to scan or skim the documents, and so we're going to spend a lot of time on formatting and on using grouping, white space, all of the font, I guess we'll say font formatting, and headings, all the stuff we talked about in Module 5, document design, in order to assist your reader in finding information quickly. Okay, and so a lot more goes into document design and business writing than in academic writing. So you can see that it's not the same situation or context. There's a lot that's different in business writing. In some ways, business writing then is easier for people because it's more direct. It seems to be more purposeful. On the other hand, if we've been really used to school writing, business writing can be hard because some of these stylistic changes are, we're used to getting strong marks because we sound smart in our academic writing. That's going to get you low marks in business writing because you need that short, direct, clear, precise language, and that can be hard for people to switch. And so again, really focused on organization and document design in business writing. You cannot just rely on this, kind of introduction, 3 points, conclusion structure. We've got to think about, and our module 13 kind of talked about that, differences between, are we trying to persuade? Is it a negative message? The organization changes based on the situation and the kind of information that you're trying to convey, so that we can, going back to the audience focus, manage the psychological needs of the audience, okay? And so we change our organization depending on what we're trying to do so that we can achieve our purpose.